Welcome back, guys. We're here with a Steam Maiden deck profile for V Premium, mostly because the reveals are coming out in a couple days, and I need to actually get this out. I'm procrastinating this. This deck is honestly, it's okay. After testing, I still feel Chronicle is a lot better. That's still probably the best way to build V-Gear Chronicle still. Hopefully those new Steam Main reveals will actually make this a little bit better. Now obviously the core of the deck is the three Steam Mains themselves. They're not so much a ride line as much as you do want one of each in your bind zone, as well as having the grade 3 on Vanguard. It also does greatly benefit from having an Uluru in your bind zone. That is typically optimally what you want. The typical flow of this deck is you will ride Steam Main Uluru, you'll throw a Force 1 into a rearguard slot, you'll either play Steam Main Uluru from your hand or from your bind zone using Uluru's Act skill. You'll attack with Uluru, then bind it using Uluru's skill. Call the grade 1. Grade 1 will attack, bind with its own skill. Call the grade 2. Grade 2 will attack, bind itself with its own skill to call the grade 3. Swing with a grade 3. The rest of the deck pretty much just exists to facilitate getting these Steam Mains in your bind zone ahead of time, as well as just other cards to support the multi-attack. Because it's mostly multi-attack, Force 2 isn't necessarily going to be the best choice for this, as this deck can't really make big columns on its own. Once your opponent has one defensive trigger, your multi-attack swing is pretty much going to go useless, so you do need to be running Force 1. You'll typically be stacking even if you survive to the next turn, which I've noticed so far in testing, I just don't. You're gonna want to just keep stacking Force 1 into the same slot. For grade 3 lineup, obviously 4 LLs, act once per turn, bind a card from your drop zone, and then call a card from your drop zone. This is typically how you'll set up one of your rearguard attackers. Auto once per turn, at the end of the battle, your rearguard with Steam Main attack, bind it, then call something from your bind zone with a grade 1 higher than what you bound. If you call a grade 1, countercharge 1. This optimally, you attack with an Uluru, bind it, call the grade 1 from bind zone, countercharge 1. You don't necessarily need to bind the 0, you can bind whatever, but the grade 1 and grade 2 can bind on their own. And continuous during your turn, you get 1,000 for every card in your bind zone. If you're on Vanguard at 3k instead of 1k, it just makes this one a little bit beefier. Deck's also running 4 Re-Innovate Wing Dragon. You could ride this if you have to, only because it's got Force, and because its ability works on Vanguard Circle. But you really do need to ride LL. If you don't, you're going to have a dead turn where all you're going to do is spend it setting up for the following turn. You can't really push unless you get her on Vanguard. Act once per turn, Soul Blast 1, bind 2 of your rear guards, look at the top 3 cards of your deck, call 2 cards from them, and then bind the 3rd card. It's just set up. You do get 2 free calls from your deck rather than your hand, which does kind of help with hand consistency here. Also running 2 Mellow Amusements Colossus. I was testing 4 or 3 of them, as this card's really good to have on your push turn, but hitting that as your only 3 and it doesn't have a force marker is pretty much the reason why I'm not running 4. If it did have a force marker, I could easily run 4 of this and then 2 Re-Innovates, but no force marker. When placed on rearguard circle, bind a card from your hand, which helps with your setup. Until end of turn, your opponent is forced to guard with at least 2 cards from their hand if they're guarding from hand. Very good on your multi-attack swings, but you do need Force 1 to force them to guard in the first place. For grade 2s, for Steam Main Owl, when you place it on a rearguard circle from bind, so when it's called by your grade 1 or by your Vanguard, bind a card from your drop and this will gain 3k until the end of the turn. That means it can at least hit base 13 on its own, and then at the end of the battle it attacked. If your Vanguard is Steam Main, counterblast 1, bind this card, choose a grade 3 from your bind zone and call it. You'll typically call the grade 3 Steam Maiden, as it can get a little bit more of a power buff, but you can still call the other 2 if you need. Running a 4 Steam Mechanic Nabu. When this attacks a Vanguard, bind a card from your drop, which you do want to do. Your opponent can't call grade 1 or greater cards to block this swing. That's fine, forces them to guard with a 0. It's pretty much just there to bind something. At the end of the battle, this card binds and you draw a card. You're typically not going to be calling this out of your bind zone unless you absolutely have to. It's just, the draw's good. 3 Steam Maiden Calibum. At the end of the battle, this is doing an attack counterblast 1 and bind this. Choose a player's rearguard and bottom deck it. If you send a grade 2 or greater to the bottom of the deck, you can choose a normal unit from your drop whose grade's equal to that, -1, and put it in your hand. If you send a grade 1 or 0 to the bottom of the deck, you draw a card and countercharge 1, which refunds some of the cost of this, which is fine. You just use this to get rid of problem rearguards, really. That's it. Grade 1 for Steam Maiden Ilil. These names are really starting to roll on each other. Act on Vanguard Circle once per turn. Soul Blast 1, bind a grade 2 or less from your hand to draw 1 card. If you bind a trigger, draw an additional card. This is hopefully, if you've mulliganed well, you bind an Uluru and you draw 2, and then Uluru is just in your bind zone and ready to go. Otherwise, you can just bind some other trigger and just get the extra draw anyway. And then it has the auto on rear guard after an attack. Counterblast 1, bind this unit, call the grade 2, so you'll call the grade 2 Steam Maiden, then attack with that, call the grade 3 Steam Maiden. The rest of the grade 1s are just to facilitate making sure you get your grade 3 Steam Maiden in your hand. 4 Steam Breath, 4 Lost Gear 8, they work on Vanguard and rear guard. Different flavors of grab a grade 3. This one's top 5, this one's search your deck for it, but you need the grade 3 in your hand, which is good. We're running 10 grade 3s, so you should hopefully at least have one of the other ones, so you can easily search out your Steam Maiden with this one, or at the very least look at top 5 for this one. This one gets an extra 5k when you do it, not that amazing. It hits base 13, but eh. Grade 0 lineup, pretty simple, generic, starter, they're all the same. Isn't that boring? For Steam Maiden Uluru, we pretty much have to run this over the grade 3 heals just because it has Steam Maiden in her name. Also best girl, so why not? And then just 8 crit, drop EG. That's it.